Hello and welcome to our day 4, our final day of live streaming coverage from RSAC Conference 2025. I'm Jameson Cush with Informa TechTarget and Ion Tech. And if you missed days 1, 2, or 3, please check them out at Ion Tech. We discuss topics ranging from agentic AI and AI sustainability to quantum preparedness and all things cybersecurity. Once again, joining me, sharing and hosting duties here in Broadcast Alley, fresh off her stint from Alcatraz, Informa TechTarget Editorial Director, Jen English. Jen, welcome back.
Thank you.
So the show is wrapping up. This is the last day. What are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, to no one's surprise, there's been a lot of talk about AI, but I've really enjoyed being able to dig into topics like, security operations, the nitty-gritty with it, IoT and OT security, cloud-native security, quantum preparedness. It's been a lot of great, fodder and a lot of information there, so it's been great. And
I expect we're going to get more information here today because the last day is usually reserved for our experts and colleagues from Dark Reading and Informa TechTarget, and we're actually going to kick that off today with Kelly Jackson Higgins, the VP of Editorial Cybersecurity and Editor-in-Chief of Dark Reading. Thank you so much for joining us, Kelly.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, well, we're excited to have you because you shared with us just before we started recording that today is actually the 19th birthday of Dark Reading.
Yeah, 19 years ago today, Dark Reading was born in 2006. So May Day, I don't know if that was on purpose, but it is May Day. So we were pretty excited, yeah. And a lot's changed since then, I can honestly say.
Yeah, tell us about the evolution of the security industry since
then. So we kind of rode along with that. We were one of the first cybersecurity pubs out there, and there were 2 of us doing the site, or three then 2 of us. And at the time, the industry was just a few dozen security vendors, not like this, over 4,000 here, I think. So it was very small, and there were a lot of pioneers doing things like breaking things and software and publishing it. Trying to get the security vendors and software vendors to pay attention to vulnerabilities. They were breaking the browsers, they were breaking Windows, and so they were kind of like the pioneers who just went in there and dug in and they were good hackers who went in and just took the reins. So we wrote a lot about that. We got to know those folks, we profiled them. So we kind of got really just immersed in the industry back then. Fast forward to today, all of those folks who were doing that are now like Chief Technology Officers at these security companies. A lot's happened since then. They don't have to get attention for finding vulnerabilities anymore. That's like part of the game, right? Is to be able to find the weaknesses before the bad guys do. So it's become a much more professional industry in a lot of ways. But I will say some of the same problems are still here, which I can't believe I'm still writing about some of the same things, or we have been. Security's hard, and that shows that it is. I mean, it's still some of the same problems. But yeah, it's been really interesting watching this show grow too. And it used to be not this particular hall wasn't even used early days, so it's really spread out.
I can imagine, though, if you look back at over 19 years, it could almost be a time machine of the trending topics in cybersecurity. So maybe it's cloud and mobile, and then it's DevSecOps, and then it's AI. So how was that journey? I mean, if you look back, can you really get a sense of how the industry has changed?
Yeah, so early on it was Windows. Microsoft Windows was the big thing, right? Then Microsoft stepped up with its secure development program and cleaned up that as much as they could, right? And then it was browser security. Browsers were super insecure back in the day, so it was almost like you had to be really careful if you were using a browser. It was a risk. So now browsers, you don't even think about your browser anymore, right? It's already security updated for you all the time. It was also just more of the desktop stuff back then, right? Cloud was still there was a little bit of cloud, but it wasn't taking over like it is now. So very much on-premises issues, your servers, and your desktop pieces. There wasn't any mobile devices rolling around at that point. I think I might have had a BlackBerry.
Yeah.
That was all I had for mobile. And you weren't doing much, you were doing email on that. You weren't doing anything else. So the mobile security was a new thing. That was not early days at all. So that's been really interesting watching that. And obviously everything moved to the cloud. Machine security and software security is still important, but just in more places now, and places that you don't necessarily realize they're there too.
So can you tell us a little bit about how our coverage Informa TechTarget is changing and adapting with this?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think, early days you might be an expert in Windows security, or like I said, or browser security. Now you have to really understand the cloud, and you have to understand, the AI. I'm sure you haven't heard about AI all week, so you know that thing called AI, which is actually not a new thing. It's been around for a long time, but it's now taking off. And all the other places where things need to be secured that maybe organizations don't realize are not secure. So The other thing that we talk a lot about in our coverage and across all the brands is identity security, because that's a really big one, especially with the cloud. There are machine identities, there are people identities, people come and go. Companies aren't always great at like tracking their privileges they have for systems, or even if someone's left the company, basically disabling their account. Those kind of things sometimes get left floating out there and leaving companies vulnerable. And as you know, like passwords are still a complete nightmare, even though they were supposed to be gone by now. We do have some more options with passcodes, but it's still not completely a simple process. And I'm sure almost every breach, there's stolen credentials. You pretend to be a person in the organization, you can get in without, initially without hopefully getting noticed. But yeah, so it's a lot more now. It's different layers, I would say, more layers of security to think about. It was even more network security back then because everybody was on premise. So now it is a little bit higher up the stack, I guess I would say.
And it's funny, just going back to what you had said about dark reading when it began, there were just a couple of you covering this industry, and now I was talking with one of our colleagues who was in the media room, and he said, well, look over here, there's a colleague, and there's another colleague, and I mean, the whole room was filled with people, not just from dark reading, but from the larger Informa TechTarget cybersecurity outlets. Yeah,
it's crazy. We have, we have 10 people on the dark reading team now, which is the most we've ever had. Like, I mean, I'm one of the 10, but I don't get to report anymore. But yeah, there's a lot to write about. We still had a lot of content here there were 6 of us here, I think, 5 people reporting from the ground, and we had a lot of stories, and there are going to be more today and tomorrow and next week. So there's a lot going on here.
So can you expand on the reach that we have now with cybersecurity,
Absolutely.
Dive, dark reading, security?
So when we merged, we created a new group. I call it the Cybersecurity Media Team, because I feel like we are a team. It's like a group. We think of ourselves as a team. So that's our 3 brands: dark reading, which is the largest one, obviously, search security, and cybersecurity dive. So we've been working together the last few months on how we can collaborate in terms of like coverage. We have different audiences, which is really cool. So, dark reading has always been about practitioners. When we first started, there were no CISOs, for example. The industry was so new, there was no such thing as a CISO. So we were covering like the researchers, the threat researchers, the software people, engineers, IT people who are like, oh gosh, I have to deal with security. But now we're all the way up the stack. We're starting with the SecOps people in the trenches, all the way to CISO. Search security is very focused on practitioners, like IT managers with security technology, deep dive stuff, long tail pieces. Obviously, you guys know this. Anybody who's in the industry wants to really research something, they're going to get that information always up to date of where things are with that. And then cybersecurity dive is a small team, and they are focused specifically on CISO and executive level security folks. And they're very much newsletter forward. So you get your newsletter at 12 noon, which is lunchtime for the East Coast, coffee time for the West Coast. So the CISO is looking at the latest news they need to worry about, and in a shorter form in most cases, so they can know what's important today, what the most important things are. They tend to focus a lot on policy, regulatory things, and also when we talk about vulnerabilities on that site, it's more about things that are actually being exploited, not just like, oh, here's this latest threat, which dark reading would cover, because we try to cover the whole landscape. They're covering like, hey, here's something your company needs to know about right now. It's something affecting critical infrastructure. That's a real threat that you need to look at right away. So we have a nice balance, and there are 3 kind of different audiences that kind of complement each other.
And there's a lot of different types of content if you're looking at it a different way, like news, thought leadership, buying advice.
Yep.
All of that.
All of it.
Really have the whole spectrum covered.
Which I should have mentioned with search security buying advice. Sorry, I left that out. I was just thinking it's so much information.
Inform the buying decision.
Exactly.
Exactly. That's great. So, being that you have been involved in this industry, at least going back to the start of dark reading, maybe before?
Way before. Okay. We're not going to say how long before. Yeah.
Fair enough. So what sort of general cybersecurity trends are you seeing for 2025? What can we expect going into 2026?
I'm going to stay away from the AI thing because everybody's already talked about that. But I think there's some other things happening that are really important. And it's been something the industry's been working on for a long time. That's application security. Getting developers to really be mindful and trained in how they code securely so that the software is from the get-go ideally baked into the code. This isn't just for security vendors, it's enterprises who are writing code, like financial services firms, the apps you use on your bank and your storage you use, whatever, is having them really thinking about getting the vulnerabilities out of that code before they roll it out. And there's a lot of new things happening in that space to make that easier. It's always been separate worlds. In the past, security was on the side kind of yelling at the developers, hey, make your stuff more secure. And they were like, we got to get this code out. We don't have time for this. But now there's like more of a marriage between the two groups, and there are more tools now to help organizations make sure their developers are writing secure code. And that's really important to the ecosystem in general. That doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, because there's always going to be vulnerabilities. No human's perfect. Even when AI is injected in that, it's still going to make mistakes. There's still going to be mistakes, and the bad guys always find a way to get in if they can. But I think that's a really important one. The other thing I think about a lot is to be a security professional now is tricky, because there are a lot of opportunities, but it's hard to get into the industry if you're new. I get a lot of young people coming to me saying, hey, how do I get in? I'm like, I don't really know how to tell you. Like, you've got to get experience, but that's not it's not an easy thing to get. And some of the CISOs we talk to have that same challenge. They want to be able to hire, but trying to find somebody who has that certain level of experience is hard to find. But there are people out there wanting the jobs, but they don't have the skill sets that they need. So I think that's a big challenge with AI going forward. Obviously, cloud, that's already part of the equation, is having people who can really understand those tools and how to use them. And then kind of piggybacking off that, a lot of security teams have a ton of tools that they're not even maximizing their use of. Like, they might have had this tool and one person was an expert and they left the company, and then they're left with this tool, oh wow, this person was our expert and they're gone, and we don't really know how to maximize its use. There's a ton of data coming at them, threat data. How do they decide what's the important stuff what's the needle in the haystack, right? What information is like something they need to act on right away? I think that's going to become more and more important. I think there are things coming on here at the show that I was hearing, that I heard, that people I talked to, that really do address that, so that it is more streamlined for security teams, because it's always going to be a race, with the threat actors. But having better tools and better ways to capitalize on your tools and the data it gives you and intel, and to use it to be able to prevent something before it escalates. That's a big one, I think, more than ever right now.
Yeah. It seems like, going back to the fact that you have 10 or a dozen or so folks covering the show, on the show floor, talking to the people here to get a better understanding of the trends and their needs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what was nice. We had, everybody was kind of doing their own thing, but we had a plan, obviously, of who was doing what. We had a big spreadsheet with all the details. And I think we had some really great stories. I haven't been able to read all of them, to be honest, because I've been meetings, but I've been reading them, and these are really good things going on here. Not just sessions, but conversations they're having. That's a nice thing about this show. It's almost like a big homecoming of the industry. We used to call it homecoming week, where you get to talk to everybody that you talk to online or you see, but you don't see in person. It's a chance for us all to kind of get together. And the community of security used to be a smaller, tighter knit. It's a lot bigger now, but there still is that core, like it is a community. And I think that's something RSA is leaning into, which makes total sense to me. But I think that's something we recapture when we go to these shows, is we get to kind of get back to that. The folks that you've known, or more contacts you have, everyone in this industry really has the same goals to make things safer, make things more secure and better. And when you're around in this environment, you really do kind of, you feed off of it. And I think for my team, it was really good for them to be able to get here and talk to folks. And also, we hadn't all seen each other in person yet, so that was nice. Besides on Teams, we got to actually meet in real life, which is important. So, yeah.
So you probably touched on this already, but what do you think the cybersecurity community needs to prioritize right now?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. I think it always comes back to the human factor, and not just on the hiring, but I think on users, there's always been sort of this attitude like, oh, users mess up everything. But I always feel like there should be a security culture, and I think that's something a lot of companies are trying to build, where everyone feels like they're part of it. Like, in your company, you're catching a fish, and you're like, yes, I see that fish, I'm going to report it. I'm probably the biggest reporter of fish in the company. If it's not a fish, I report it because I think it looks suspicious. Security paranoia. But I think it's really important that to really make a more secure world, all companies, all organizations, even people, consumers, need to understand, we're all part of this. It's like a, having, if you see something, say something idea, right? But to everyone to kind of be bought into, you can help make this better if you're noticing things and you're aware of what not to do, what not to click on, how to catch something before it escalates. I think the human factor is super important. I don't know what the answer is to how to fix that, but I think the conversations have been going on out there. There are some organizations who really do lean into that, but I think it's still not as widespread as I would like to see it be. So.
Excellent. Well, I don't want to close on that thought, but we do have to say goodbye. So Kelly, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. It was really nice talking to you all. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining us. For Gen English, I'm Jameson Cush. Please remember to like and subscribe.